Airbnb just literally dropped a bomb on the hosting community last week, and a lot of people are freaking out. They think the end of the world is here. But what we're gonna do in this video is explain what the update was, why people are so upset about it, but most importantly, what can you do as a host today in order to continue to thrive and grow your hosting business. Let's dive into it.
So this is your first time joining us. Welcome. I'm Katrina.
Michael here.
And we are the co-creators of STR Wealth Academy. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on all social media platforms for everything short-term rentals, Airbnb. We've been in the industry for 8 years. We've been able to grow and scale our short-term rental business to over 73 listings and going and helping 400 students be able to do the same thing. So let's get into this video today. This is sending shockwaves across the entire hosting community. Airbnb is pissed. They are not happy. And for good reason, but I think this is going to be a really big update that they're gonna have to do a lot of tweaks on. So let's get into it.
So on April 11th, I woke up and I got this email in my inbox. So as soon as I read it, I felt a little bit of tension in my chest because this was a major update and had some pretty big implications. So basically said they've updated their off-site payment and fee policy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take you guys through line by line exactly what this means, and most importantly, what can you do about it. So essentially what's happening right now is Airbnb has gotten wise to the fact that a lot of people are using Airbnb in order to get a guest through to their property, and then they're essentially collecting that guest data in order to remarket to that guest for future stays so that they would come back and book direct, which in essence cuts Airbnb out of the picture. They were seeing that this was happening, so with this update, they've essentially dropped the hammer to try to put an additional moat around their business model so that it's trying to make people even more dependent and even more reliant on Airbnb. So let's kind of go through the policy line by line.
There's about 6 main policies that they're introducing here. And at a high level, we want to give you our perspective on it, our thoughts, what we're going to really see happen, and kind of maybe the reasoning behind it too. But as Michael said, even on the first line, was moving current guests, future ones, or repeat bookings off of Airbnb. So one of the biggest maybe gaps or something that Airbnb has seen over year after year is that a lot of guests are actually starting to book direct. So hosts have become wise, started getting direct booking websites, either if it's through Boostly or creating their own direct booking website. They started creating this, and a lot of people are driving these customers off of Airbnb so they don't have to pay these Airbnb fees. But obviously this is how Airbnb makes money, so they want to prevent this as much as possible. Say, hey, we found this client for you through our platform. They need to stay here, and we need to keep collecting our pound of flesh, essentially.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, Airbnb does spend obviously millions of dollars on advertising and marketing. So from their position, they're essentially saying it's like, well, we are incurring a massive cost in order to get people to use our platform in order to send you the business. So we want to keep that person's information and contact details with us rather than being able to provide it to you. So for this first point here, they're basically saying they're almost eliminating to this extent where you're asking current guests to either extend their current stay, book a future stay, or have a repeat booking with anyone else other than Airbnb.
And they're not joking around here, guys. They're saying they either want to suspend or completely ban your listing if you break any of these rules. So they're really coming in strong on this and saying, hey, if you don't follow this, you're not even going to be able to be allowed on our platform anymore. Which, as we know, Airbnb is the juggernaut of short-term rentals, where you do find quite a bit of the bookings.
100%. So that's the first part of the policy. The second one is failing to disclose reservation fees at the time of booking. Now this is fairly big because if you watch some of our other videos, we're big proponents of having pet fees, late check-in fees, early check-in fees. And the most important thing with this is essentially what they're saying here is all of these prices now have to be built into your nightly rate, which could be very significant if it's not properly done and it's not disclosed in your listing. And it could also really reduce the amount of income that you could actually make if this isn't done properly.
And guys, with this as well, so point number 2 about failing to disclose, this is probably one of the biggest ones on here because there is so much more that you can make on top of a booking. And This is what is really frustrating as hosts, I would say, because there's let's say you want to have groceries like delivered to your house, or like some kind of menu or something, right? You can't necessarily advertise that or include that in the rate, because sometimes they don't even have a field for it or something like that in there. So it's a little bit frustrating. And even on top of it, so for pet fees, for instance, there's a certain way around that. And the way we do it, and a number of our students, is we actually collect pet fees after, because sometimes we have a lot of midterm rental bookings. So what do we mean by that? So it could be week to 2 weeks, so sometimes multiple months. And when you're paying at a per night rate for a pet, that gets super expensive for guests coming in. So we actually try to attract people that are staying longer to have a flat pet fee on that case, but the Airbnb platform does not have that flexibility. And so that's why we collected it after. Now they're saying you have to have it up front, else you can't collect it at all.
So this could be obviously very problematic for collecting additional fee income, but also having the flexibility as a host to be able to negotiate or give incentives and discounts on this additional fee income, which, I mean, to give you guys an idea, like last year in our business, just pet fees alone added almost $60,000 in total to our company. So it's not nothing. This is something that typically happens with Airbnb, is that they will announce a policy, they'll get a ton of backlash, and then they'll come up with 3 or 4 different versions of it, and then eventually they'll settle on the finalized policy. So it's still early. I suspect that there may be some leeway given here in terms of what the final version is going to be. But it's still early, guys, so we'll have to take a look and see what happens from here.
Yeah, and in the point number 2 as well, it talks about security deposits. So this is a massive, massive point. So it says failing to disclose a security deposit. Most hosts are not allowed to charge a security deposit, is what it's saying. And this is very, very, well, number one, this is dangerous to even have this without a security deposit of anyone coming. And we've been doing this for years, and we coach and train our students to be able to collect this. And this has been a really contentious point between back and forth with hosts and Airbnb for years, to be completely honest. They had already restricted it that you couldn't take it through the resolution center anymore. That was an update we saw about a year and a half ago. And then now they're saying, hey, if you just do not disclose the security deposit at all, you cannot collect it. So you're really flying blind on here and relying on Airbnb's air cover, which is kind of a crapshoot as well, right? It's not guaranteed that they're gonna, pay you out for what your home is actually worth and the damages and what been fully caused. So what's really important here as well is that you have to make sure you're an API connected software. So in order to collect security deposits, you have to be an API connected and approved software with Airbnb. This is good and bad. So us and quite a number of our students use an API connected software. So it's a channel manager that directly integrates with Airbnb and is able to actually disclose what the fees look like and the security deposit before you book. This is good and bad, but so part of it is when a lot of people have just 1 or 2, a lot of people do not have these softwares because they only have 1 or 2 properties. That's actually the majority of listings on Airbnb. So not a lot of people have these softwares. Usually you're going to see it when you're starting at scale or some of these businesses. So it's kind of leaning towards, hey, if you're a business, you can have this, but not if you're a mom and pop, only having 1. So if you're wondering what it looks like to be an API connected software that has a direct integration to disclose that you require a damage deposit, here's an example right here where you can see this host actually requires a $500 damage deposit collected separately from the Airbnb platform and actually discloses it before you book. So that's what Airbnb means when it's an API connected software.
So if you are using a channel manager that gives you the ability to have that direct connection with Airbnb, the good news is that you can still collect the security deposits separately after the booking is made. So that is still, if you are a professional host that's in
You're freaking out. You're like, oh my goodness.
So the good news is you can still collect that, which is going to be obviously very helpful. Let's keep moving through this. Okay, now this is probably the next major announcement that's come out with this big policy change. So one of the things that they're saying is asking guests who are using any kind of contact or identity information in ways unrelated to their stay that compromise the quality of their stay.
That's very broad, which is,
yeah.
This is very loose language. I don't really appreciate this because it can be kind of twisted in any which way. Mm-hmm. But essentially they're saying here, asking guests for contact information prior to booking. Okay, if you're asking for like a phone number, but that's been a rule, it's not new. They block out the phone number. They email rather. Phone number and email if you haven't booked.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So you have to be very careful doing that already. So that's not new, trying to collect information before a guest books.
So the other thing that's obviously huge here is that they want to obviously limit your ability to collect guest emails, because if you have their email, well, then you can directly remarket to that guest in order to take that guest off of Airbnb in order to book direct with you, which again cuts out the middleman, which, Airbnb does not want, and they want to have that control. This is really big though, because larger companies like Sonder, what they were essentially doing was when a guest booked an Airbnb through Sonder, they would literally require guests to download an app which would give all of their check-in details, and they would have to give their contact details in order to get the app in the first place. So Airbnb is essentially dropping the hammer on this, saying, no, all of the check-in details and all of the pertinent information that guests need in order to get to the property has to be communicated on Airbnb and cannot be communicated off of the platform.
So what's really important about this, guys, is that essentially they're saying they want everything to happen through the Airbnb platform only. They don't want any transactions. They don't want any communication, literally nothing to happen outside the Airbnb platform, because they also just want to make sure that they keep their guests on there and only on there. So let's go to point number 4 here. Taking people off the platform for feedback and reviews. This is important, in particular our business when you start to get to scale, because we not only get Airbnb reviews, we also request guests to do Google reviews or any kind of feedback. And I think this is so important for our business. We make sure we get direct feedback from guests on Google and these other platforms so we can improve our hosting business. But Airbnb says, no, you can only go through our feedback loops and what we have. And that's really frustrating because Airbnb's review policy is quite stringent. It's really hard to remove a review. I don't actually agree with that at all, because one of the biggest drivers we have for new people wanting to book with us or stay with us is through Google. And that we've been able to, I think, accumulate over 500 Google reviews because we've asked guests to do this.
Correct. And this has been a major driver for new management clients for our business, because when they go and search on Google, short-term rental management company, city name, Airbnb management company, city name, and we pop up, it's a major driver of business for us. So obviously we're going to have to pivot and figure out an alternative strategy in order to keep those reviews coming in. But like anything else, you got to be able to pivot and you got to be able to be flexible, because, since we've been in the industry over the last 7-8 years here, it's a moving target and it's something that you got to stay on your toes for. Okay, the final point here, and we've already kind of touched on this again, is basically requiring guests to use other websites or apps to physically access the listing. Now, in our business, we had used tools prior, such as AutoHost, where you basically have guests complete pre-arrival requirements. Now, as of right now, we still don't know what's going to happen with these third-party tools, because they essentially built their entire business off of being able to have these services to get guests to complete pre-arrival requirements or to give contact information outside of Airbnb.
This is a huge blow to these third-party apps. Like, they've built their entire business around this, right? There's Safely, there's Truvi, there's where they collect security deposits or waivers. There's so many of these, and it's a gray area right now. A lot of these third-party apps are scrambling, trying to figure out what does it actually, because it's very loose wording, as I said before, right? But you do want to protect your property, right? When having either a waiver or damage deposit. And of course, you disclose this before. This is the biggest thing, is make sure you disclose this on your listing, because that will be your first line of defense, is having an other things to note or additional information. As much time, even just in the conversation when you're saying, hey, thanks for booking, as we disclose, you have to do X, Y, Z, right? Just make sure you have that as your first line of defense so you can protect yourself when you just upfront and disclose it. But it's kind of a gray area, and I think there's going to be a lot of reiterations on this, because there are lots of third-party apps that require this. But there's even some, for instance, digital house manuals,
yes,
right, that take you off the platform. And Airbnb is now saying you can't have a digital house manual. No. You have to have it on the platform and only on the platform. And that is a whole entire industry in itself too, having these digital. So long story short of it, guys, you can kind of see on here, this is really, really tightening up all the restrictions around what you can do with a guest on the Airbnb platform, which is very, honestly, kind of shocking. To me, my personal opinion, is a bit of an overreach. I understand why they're doing it, but I would say the penalty with it, they're saying suspend and remove your if you have violations in this, right? So it's quite strict.
Yeah, it's not just even the listing. It could potentially be your entire account if you have repeated infractions. So in terms of what you can do about this, here's the most important things to remember. If you are using an API connected software that directly integrates with Airbnb, you can still collect a security deposit separately after the booking is made. So that can still happen. Ooh. Other factors such as requiring guests to do ID verification or sign a rental agreement.
Having background checks.
That's you're probably not going to be able to do that anymore, unfortunately. So
yeah, so it's a little bit iffy on those cases. Like I said, we're going to see some reiterations. This is not, I think, fully going in until May 10th or 11th. And, you know, I think a lot of feedback. So Airbnb wants a lot of feedback on here. They have like a suggestion area where you have it, and it's going to be really important for hosts to speak up on this, especially if you're protecting your property or if you're a manager. I mean, we're at 73 listings. We're protecting other people's properties and doing background checks, checking IDs. This is huge, especially if you have like the police involved with any kind of incident. You always need IDs. And the thing is, on Airbnb, you don't get access to those IDs. Even though it's on the Airbnb platform, you don't get access to it. So we'll see how it kind of shakes out on it, but those are some major updates. The other ones I would say, I mean, it's going to be very interesting. They're essentially saying you can't have even in your property certain like pamphlets or brochures to be able to do direct. I don't know how they're really going to be able to control that, but that's the level that they're doing in this kind of update, that you can't even have a fridge magnet or anything like that. They're saying you can't solicit to guests to book direct at anywhere.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a little bit of blowback on that. As far as pamphlets and fridge magnets and stuff like that, that's something we've been doing in our business for
years.
Several years now. And I think that's not something that's going to be easily monitored or sustained over the long term. So again, as a business standpoint, you need to protect yourself. And if this isn't a wake-up call for you to start going multi-platform, if you're only listed on Airbnb, you're introducing a lot of risk into your business, because, you know, we've seen this time and time again, and nobody thinks it will happen to them until it does. And then one day you can wake up, and if they don't like you anymore, you could be out of business just like that. So what you can do from here is, again, make sure you have everything properly disclosed. We're going to drop the links to the policy so you can read it in full and really understand what to do. But the second thing is, you got to get multi-platform now. Okay, so if you're just on Airbnb, you for sure need to get on booking.com. You for sure need to get on VRBO.
And direct bookings, right? But just be very careful how you solicit those direct bookings, right? Make sure you have a Google listing. Make sure, if really good SEO, you could have blogs, you could have your own social media platform where you promote it. Like, Airbnb cannot control those elements, right? And that's what you can control and start driving traffic to that.
100%. And that'd be the third point with this is, again, focus on what you can control. You or I or us, we can't control what Airbnb is going to do next from here. But what we can control is we have a lot of other tools and channels available. Make sure you're using those as much as possible, because at the end of the day, Airbnb is not responsible to make your business successful. Okay?
You are.
You are.
So hopefully you found those updates really helpful to kind of in our perspective into it. Again, I think we're going to do more videos down the road this to see what kind of tweaks and reiterations we're going to be seeing. But make sure you give Airbnb their feedback on it. And I want to hear your guys' feedback as well. Like, drop some comments here in the YouTube video down below. I want to hear your guys' comments on these new updates and what you think will shake out from this. So again, guys, please like and subscribe and follow us on all different social media channels, and we'll see you in the next video.
We'll see you there.